Make sure to subscribe today and make sure you like and make sure you leave your comments and ideas. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
So, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Ahmaduhu wa usalli ala Rasulil Kareem. So, here we are at the juncture of the next phase of the New World Order. And basically, what seems to be happening is something quite interesting. You see, when I was young, about 20 years ago, and I used to read the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ regarding Islamic eschatology, and I would think, like, we live in a very secular world. Like 20 years ago, the universities were run by people who didn't even believe in God. And when you read the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, you read about, religious wars, global religious and global holy wars happening. Who knew 20 years later that the situation would be turning around 180 degrees or 360 degrees? The point being is that there was a time where the secular, the non-religious had the upper hand, particularly here in the West. And the universities were run, and the intellectuals were those who were considered, who didn't believe in God. You weren't really smart if you believed in God. Come on, you believe in something you can't even see. So now, there's been a series of events, right? The New Zealand shooting where somebody, does a shooting at a masjid, many people die. May Allah have mercy upon them. And then after that, you have the Notre Dame fire, and you have a phenomenon happening in France where many churches have been vandalized. You have the same phenomenon happening in Israel, where, I even showed that the fatwa, the rabbi saying, we can vandalize churches in the holy city. And then here you have the biggest, most monstrous, the most evil of attacks that just happened in Sri Lanka. Now, what's very interesting is that New Zealand has nothing, okay, if somebody attacks America because America is occupying their land, or if somebody attacks Israel because Israel's attacking their land, it makes some sense at least, okay, this person's angry at this person because he's attacking me, right? But New Zealand had nothing to do with anyone. And the same thing goes with Sri Lanka. I mean, there's no reason for 200 people to be killed in Sri Lanka. But yet here we are in the next phase of this New World Order that is trying to create and force and to manufacture a conflict that doesn't exist. And creating a scenario where people will fight a global holy war, so to say, a religious war at the global level. And so what's going on? Let's take a look at a few things that are being said. And I also want to mention here, it is not going to be effective for Muslims to just go on the defensive and say, oh, this is not Islam, this is not Islam, this is not Islam. Because you have a whole generation that's grown up believing in these stereotypes, watching them on TV, watching them on the news, watching them in Hollywood movies. You have to call out, a spade is a spade. You have to now. You cannot take the defensive posture of, oh, well, Muslims don't believe in this. That's not going to work anymore. One of the only things you can really do is you have to call a spade a spade. You have to say there is a conspiracy going on here. And you know what? A lot of conspiracies that people thought about did happen, okay? And so there's something very sinister going on here, and we have to call this out, and we have to bring this to the attention of the Jewish community and the Christian community, that somebody is playing with the cards behind the scenes and trying to create a conflict that does not exist, What happened to, we destroyed ISIS, and ISIS is no longer able to do anything. What happened to the hornet's nest theory? The hornet's nest theory was a theory that if we create a thing like ISIS, all the ISIS-minded people will go to ISIS and join ISIS, and then we'll put them all together and we'll just kill them all. And this was, the plan that they had. And so now that they have so-called defeated ISIS, how come we have all these suicide bombings happening in a country that has nothing to do with a country that has not hurt Muslims at all? So let's look at a few things now. The only way that Muslims can have a discourse on this issue, on the issue of why are Muslims so extremists, and the only way is we have to call a spade a spade. The only way we can do this is we have to say that there's a Zionist agenda here, that the only people that benefit from this conflict are people that benefit from this conflict because they want to take over a mosque known as Al-Aqsa to build their temple. Number one. The only people who benefit from this conflict, that while the whole world is in this chaos, they can go ahead and expand into their greater Israel. The only people who benefit from this in every single way is the Zionists. And we have to say now, there's the whole defensive posture of that, oh, we're so sorry that we're Muslims, and we're so sorry that we have such bad Muslims, and we're so sorry that, Muslims killed 200 people. Yes, of course, but we are sorry that that happened. But we are not going to just take this defensive posture where, things are being put upon us that are just not true. And so let's look at a few things in the newspaper or the news. Sri Lanka, like world, again sees scourge of suicide bombings. Now, what I want to tell you about Sri Lanka has seen terrorism, but it was Hindu terrorism in the past. You have the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka that want their own independence. Sri Lanka military gets special powers. Now, this is another very important point, which is that anytime there's a crisis like 9/11, anytime there's a crisis and bombs blow up, what's the first thing that's going to happen is that the military or the authority, the people in authority are going to get more powers. And this is a very important step for the New World Order because they want to take away the guns and any way of people defending themselves when they finally make that final move where, the currency is going to fall and everything happens. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I'm only going to talk about a few aspects. But they are going to increase, even in the U.S. now, the powers of the presidents have been Obama and Trump era. They're starting from the George Bush 9/11 era. The America is still in a state of emergency, right? It's still in a state of emergency ever since 9/11. So everything is being pushed in a certain direction. Basically, let's get ready for war. Let's beat the drums of war. This is what's happening, and who benefits from this? Sri Lanka attacks. Authorities face scrutiny over advance warning. So-called India of all countries, gave Sri Lanka a notice that this is going to happen. This is the same scenario. Oh, we had the intelligence, but we didn't act upon it. Do you remember where this first time happened? 9/11. Oh, we had the intelligence, and so now, but we didn't still act upon it. So you have the same kind of like story repeating itself. And Sri Lanka imposes emergencies, says international network involved in attacks. So now all of a sudden, after Al-Qaeda has been destroyed, now there is a new boogeyman or something. Now there's a new international network involved in the attacks, right? Now, Sri Lanka says jihadist group behind blast that killed 290 people. Sri Lanka terror vindicates Pompeo Trump warning. So basically the idea is that, Trump was right. Trump's been, telling us and warning us against the Muslims, right? And look at what they just did, right? And now this will become the headline. So everything that happened in New Zealand, the mass shooting, all that will now be overshadowed by this, because this is like 10 times worse from just a human life perspective. And when did this happen? This happened on Easter, the day of resurrection of Jesus, peace be upon him, so called. And so now here is not only a religious site, not only are the churches blown up in Sri Lanka, but also on a religious day. So that makes it like far worse, right? So who benefits from this conflict? And what this is doing is there's nothing more to galvanize you than opposition, right? I mean, take an example. When you have an enemy, right? Like, let's say, I'll give you an example in history. Pakistan and India are like not on good terms, or Palestine and Israel are not on good terms. It's very easy to polarize yourself in that situation. And now this is being done at a global level. Pompeo blames Islamic radical terror for Sri Lanka attacks. And you know who Pompeo is and what type of agenda he has. He has a Christian Zionist, like hardcore I'm for Israel agenda. Okay? And so Sri Lanka blames Islamists for Easter attacks as death toll hits 290. Several Americans killed in Sri Lanka attacks. Pompeo says that. So what is it that we can do as Muslims? Well, not much, but we cannot be in the defensive anymore, because these things are going to happen, and as they're happening, we need to do like kind of like a predictive. We need to take a predictive stance. That, look, this is happening now, it was happening in the past, and it's going to continue to happen. There will be more churches burned, there will be more, and it's not Muslims, more places, holy places, more places of worship, more people are going to be killed on, a scale that's not heard of, in ways that are unheard of, and it's being, and it's just going to be to push one group against another group, and another group against another group. And what's interesting, I'll show you about this in a second if I get to it. But first, I want to show you this dua of the Prophet ﷺ that's very appropriate for this type of situation that we're in. So the Prophet ﷺ, this is a hadith in Sahih Bukhari. It's over here, but if you want the tashkil on it, it is Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahdil bala'i. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I seek your refuge from turmoils. وَدَرْكِ الشِّقَاءِ, and from the evil, you can say, sequence of events, from like turmoils. وَسُوءِ الْقَضَاءِ, and qada, qadar wa qada, so from evil qadar, from evil destiny. Okay, over here it says evil of judgment. It's not evil of judgment. سُوءِ الْقَضَاء, it could also mean evil of judgment, but it really means like qada and qadar in that sense. So Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahdil bala wa darkil shiqa and su'il qada, and then this, what is the result of that? Wa shatamul a'da, and the joy of our enemies. They do this to us and they're laughing behind the scenes. Look what we did, right? They do 9/11 and then they're having this joy, and now they do this, they're having this joy. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahdil bala'i وَدَرْكِ الشِّقَاءِ وَسُوءِ الْقَضَاءِ وَشَتَمَ الْأَعْدَاءِ. Now, you may be, on the internet listening to different shayukh, listening about lectures about the end of times, and it might motivate you and charge up your batteries. But if you want to do something, learn this dua and say it after your prayers, inshallah ta'ala. Allahumma inni, and I'll put a link in the description for this if you want this, for memorizing this, so that at least you're doing something, because we're in a place that no one can help us except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It really is a terrible, terrible situation that we're in. So the world is, and all this is going to end up doing what? All this is going to end up is, the holiest of the holiest places for the Jews, and the holiest places for the Muslims. This will all end up right centering around that. Somebody's gonna, some poor Zionist guy is gonna go and blow up the Al-Aqsa Masjid, for example, and say, oh, well, you guys have been blowing up our synagogues. And oh, that reminds me that even before the New Zealand shooting, what happened? First, in America, in Philadelphia, a synagogue was blown up. That's where it started. It started with I think it was called the Tree of Life synagogue. And then after that, the New Zealand shooting. After that, Notre Dame. And then after that, the Sri Lanka blast. No one benefits from this except for one group. And that has to be called out. Because I don't think, and I don't think majority of the Muslims think, that Muslims have any revenge to take with Sri Lanka. This is just stupid. It's preposterous. It doesn't make any sense. If you have the control of the media, it's easy to make Muslims look like, some crazy people that are just like gonna do crazy things. But there's actually a bigger agenda going on here. And so we need to be aware of that. So please do learn that dua. Please do subscribe and like, and please share your comments and thoughts about the direction that this world is now going in. We are literally entering into a phase of things are speeding up in a certain direction. And that direction is a direction of conflict. And all this will end up into the bringing down of Al-Aqsa. And then after bringing down of Al-Aqsa, it's going to end up with the Malhama, which is the nuclear war, which the Prophet ﷺ talked about. So I just want to end here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Make sure to subscribe today, and make sure you like, and make sure you leave your comments and ideas. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
أشهد أن لا